All right, so welcome into the live stream today. We're going to be jumping into Bitcoin and, of course, Ethereum, taking a look at where the market is going, which may be in an interesting spot. Also, kind of breaking down where the trends are pushing in the near to long term. We're going to dive into all that. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today, of course, Mr. Evan Aldo, kicking it up with some charts. It's going to be fun. A lot of stuff happening, but at the same time, I think when we look at just off of the FOMC meeting last week, we saw a little bit of a move. Obviously, we've started to see some sideways action. If you've been following our CPI, our own crypto power index, seeing a little bit of slowness down in the market overall. But at the same time, there are some indicators that are still pushing down, but that we may see a little bit of a correction. We'll dive into some charts here shortly. This was just basically a quick story. Bitcoin due one of its greatest bull markets as a July gain, circle around 20%. This was a pretty good run here that we've had. The question is whether or not August will look like we get to see more potential opportunities there, or do we see some downturns kind of leaning into what could be a really tough Fed meeting in September? A lot of that going on. Evan, when you look at, and this was an interesting thing right here, this was CZ kind of making a statement that the market is now healthier than when Bitcoin was at 68K. Do you think that is the case?
So it's a really interesting time. It looks like either one of the biggest bull traps I've seen ever, or we may be lucky and we're bottoming out. Now, what I want to show you on the charts here, let's look at our 16-day first. Now, the reason I'm looking at the 16-day is because this was the chart, the time frame that both Ethereum and Bitcoin bottomed out last time and the time before. Look at the 16-day green dot here. This was the bottom in marked the 2018 bottom a few months later. Same thing here, February 2015, marked the bottom there. Now, what happened both times here is it looked like, see, you're printing it now, but in Market Cipher, it doesn't confirm for 11 days, you can see here. Yep. The same exact thing happened back in July of 2018, August, this general area. It's when this yellow line here, the VWAP, crosses above the zero line. It could change within this amount of time. Now, if we dump down a lot in the next 11 days, this signal is going to go away. And look at how it happened last time here. See the green with the candle here? We got, if you could see, it might be a little hard to see, but you could see the green here, kind of like this, and then you corrected 62% here. Same thing here. Let's look at November of 2014. That was a 60%, 67% decrease. So it would probably be a little less than, obviously, 60%, maybe 55 or something. And what we could do is map this out here. Let's say it's about 50%, 56 or something, a little less. 10K, 12K, these areas right here, and you could get a really nice bottom in September with that. Now, I'm going to have to swallow my words if we do confirm this in about 11 days, then I'm going to flip a little bit more bullish. But what we can see here is it's looking even worse a little bit on our daily. This is looking pretty bad. Now, look at these RSIs here, split apart, and you have a bearish dip. See how these momentum waves are coming down while price is coming up, rejecting off of this major level here. Same thing, look at these split RSIs here. This was about a 63% correction. So that's that same 63 that maybe we could see. Now, I don't really see that would bring Bitcoin kind of under, 10K or under. I don't see it really going that low. I think there's a lot of hope at 12K, those type of areas. But if you look at for the short term, a lot of people want to know the short term, what to do in the short term. I think it's going to be, a general increase or decrease, like this over here. If you see this money flow crossover from red to green here, 27%. Now we're seeing from green to red here, 27% would bring us right to the bottom we had at 17K. So maybe a double bottom pattern. So that's what I'm looking at for the short term. I think it's a nice, not financial advice, but what I'm doing, nice short entry down to maybe at least 22K here.
I was looking at a couple of, this one is also a story just on, general markets overall. Bitcoin trading cautiously, even as real yield, this being dollar support, is kind of a bullish stance. To your point, is that if it doesn't print out in 11 days, then there could be some more indices that could push this up at that particular time. Question will be timing here overall. If you go on in this article, they kind of break it down a little bit here. It says what appears to be a chart-driven pullback could be fleeting considering the declining or real inflation-adjusted bond yield, which we know is declining. So that means that when you have bonds going down, now you're on risk on for these kinds of assets, such as Bitcoin. Same thing with dollar, which of course has started to adjust as well. So example, 10-year US bond inflation index security dropped 46 basis points down to 0.20, lowest point since May. This is also reviving the case in investing in risk assets. So again, get back to the point of with other assets starting to slow, which is one of the big characteristics. Dollar goes down, people go into Bitcoin. They're looking for that safe haven. Same thing here, kind of with a 10-year U.S. bond. So when you look at those kind of factors, if we don't, and there's no reason for these to continue to potentially go up because of the situation that we're dealing with, both from the FOMC, CPI printing. Likelihood is we have an August 10th, here in 9 days, we're going to get another CPI print. Let's say that CPI, that price index moves up to 10 from a 9.1 to where we get a heavy print. That's going to be some pretty heavy pressure. The question is, does that really push heavily into a potential of Bitcoin going down? If you had one of those, because that's really the next major potential event.
Well, I mean, the way I see it is that if inflation goes up, which I think it will, and unemployment kind of remains low, I think the Fed isn't going to be too afraid to raise rates even more.
One more
and there's
50
going to be
basis.
a lot of people are going to, see that, and that's going to bring us down to that one final leg as well.
Well, okay, so the FOMC, we don't see that happening until September. Yeah, so you're going to get two prints. You're going to get the August print, obviously the early September print, both of which are going to be data points that could be positive CPI numbers, meaning both up. Now, if we get a slight down in September from a CPI position, plus you have the FOMC meeting and you have the ETH merge happening.
Right.
Now you've got a little bit of...
That could mark the bottom.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of confluences there that really could indicate some interesting things. I was looking at a couple other tweets here. Just Bitcoin unstoppable. I love that one. And then this one right here, a little bit about Bitcoin miners generating $555 million in revenue in July 20 this year. So that, again, still very solid from a miner position. And we're going to get a chance to talk to Sue Ennis tomorrow from HUD 8 to really kind of dive into that, because this has a lot of bearing, at least in price and also in the potential of if Bitcoin gets in stress, when would be the selling point? Because that's going to be a big question if we do see a real bottom come in here. If you look at that, so let's say short term, we're looking at a trade for Bitcoin. How would you trade this right now? If you were trading today under, where we're trading around 23.
This is what I'm looking at right now. So I entered this position a lot higher, but I don't think it's probably not too late to give it a shot right now. These areas right here, this is more of a swing position. If you wanted to enter right now, not the best entry, but who knows, we could just dump down to these levels pretty quickly like we did here. I would be looking to take my first profits over here, maybe set a stop loss above this big fib level here, 24.2, and that's not an awful risk-reward ratio. Or at this point, in a better risk-reward ratio right here would be taking first profits. What I'm doing though for ETH though, and ETH I think obviously more volatile, and we've come up 100%. I think this could dump down a lot more.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do here, I don't know if we're going to go this low, but I think we will. Stop loss above the swing high over here, and then take your profits. Perfect, a really good risk-reward ratio around 1400. And ETH is looking, pretty bearish, especially 3 hour coming down there. Your 2-day is about to print a red dot. RSIs are split on the 2-day as well. Pretty bearish. Daily, same deal as well. On your Heiken Ashi candles here, your daily bearish div confirms about 6 hours. I think it will, and I think it will bring us down quite a bit here. I mean, ETH could, not to be, bringer of bad news here, but ETH with a 5 hour, if you look at this, if you just repeat this general trajectory here, this was about a 76% increase. This could easily bring us all the way back down to where we were, down 50%, down to these areas right here within, if we kind of map this out, it could happen sooner, August, it could be mid-August. August could definitely be a bloodbath here. So
that gets back into that $1,000 ETH range. We could see it, in that suggestion. When you look at, all right, so there's a lot of different ways of playing this merge. This is one article, pro traders saying, they may use risk-averse Ethereum options strategy to play the merge. So if you look at that in an overall strategy going into September,
right?
September 9th, I think it's 19th, is when the merge goes on. And if you look at that in comparison, how would you play that out if we see a bit of a dip and you get a chance to get into ETH? Where do you see that short-term top? Because that's, you're going to get a lot of fluid from what's going to happen in September. Again, a lot of it leaning into what the last two CPIs were, because people are going to think about FOMC, because that's overall general market.
Right.
Do you think it's a short-lived run for ETH?
It's going to be hard to say. It depends where we are. If ETH is still at, like what I'll show you too on our map here, is the main point I'm looking for at ETH is this area right here, which is about between 600 from here, about 700 all the way down to like 300. So if we're in between that range in September, which I think we can be, because you kind of map this out how we were over here, we're kind of like November 2018, this area. If you come back down, and this is actually, if you say we're right here, so September 2018, about 2 months, that would be September. So if we're at these areas, you come down, let's say it was 60% that time, I believe, 60, 70%, 600, I would be going into ETH. But the other thing you got to keep in mind though with ETH is every time we bottomed out, altcoins bleed against Bitcoin. They bottom out at the same time. Bitcoin still outperforms them for 6 months to a year after. So it may be a good idea to maybe wait till early next year, or even mid next year. So definitely look at the ETH Bitcoin evaluations, look at those charts. Because at that point, if we're going down to 12K Bitcoin, a $600 ETH, people are going to be very hesitant with altcoins, believe me.
Yeah, altcoins I think will struggle the most, in that range. It will be a question of how long, which has been our thesis all along, is that we think we're going to see that 13 to 14 range. We're going to see that as our bottom. Potentially the question is, how quickly can the Fed start to correct the ship to get us on? Because really, and we talked about this with Andrew Horowitz just the other day, and his whole point is that you've got to be much earlier than the market is when you start to see a slight uptrend. So for instance, a positive CPI or a lowering of the interest, now you've got money flowing into the markets. When you see money flowing into the traditional markets, typically Bitcoin has kind of tailed or, come along with it. So the potential is kind of unique. In this article, they kind of base their whole aspect around this. So what they're talking about is a risk reversal option strategy to hedge losses from unexpected price swings. Do you like these kinds of strategies when you're trading?
There's always, those type of strategies. I don't trade necessarily that way. I mean, I do have long-term holdings, and I kind of offset that by trying to short the market, more with leverage trading, things of that nature. That's kind of my strategy. There's so many, different ways to trade, and everybody has their own way to do it. You would spend years and years and years learning it.
Yeah.
But I'd have to read more up on that. But it sounds good to me. Yeah.
All right. So in looking at ETH now, so if you charting back to I want to go back to your chart there, because you had some interesting points there. On the ETH chart, when you look at, say, right now, we've got August as our full month. We're going to have a lot of activity kind of moving into September just because of the merge. So the likelihood is, if the merge stays on lock and we hold a September date, likelihood is we're going to see a lot more activity coming into that. Where do you think in August, if you look at where it's kind of trending right now with both the money flow crossover and where our performance has been in the past, do you think we come into, say, late August, early September?
Late August, early September, yeah. I think it's going to be pretty similar to kind of a dump like this almost. And it could happen we look at our 5-hour money flow crossover here, like I was looking at, it could bring us down in the next 2 weeks, mid-August, late mid-August, September. It's this type of, I don't want to say, I don't think it's going to be, 76% like this, because that would bring us so low. That would be like Armageddon crazy. But, the 76%, let's just map it out a little bit. It brings us the 70% right to 500.
That's a doomsday event.
That's a doomsday. It could happen though, and what we've seen is
no way, Evan.
Well, look what happened.
I got to argue that one.
Yeah, look what happened here though. Look what happened right here.
That is true.
The same type of thing that we've seen, and it was the same area too on the 16-day as well. You were trying to come up. You most likely printed a green dot here, like we're looking at right now. You printed it, but it didn't confirm, and then you just came down to the final bottom. So that would probably coincide with your theory with the merge, end of August, September.
And of course you have to be the contrarian here too, because if the merge does not happen, then you're exactly right. You get into fundamentals falling apart on projects like ETH. If a merge gets slowed down or delayed, maybe into 23, that would absolutely crater ETH, I think, in the
Yeah.
short term. Because I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for what's happening in ETH right now. In fact, I think maybe a little bit of an early run on it as well.
Right.
When I look at just our own CPI data, our Crypto Power Index data, I'll go to ETH real quick. And you've been seeing this dip really since last week. We saw that big run up to almost 1,500, and then we've seen two prints under that have both been downward on the overall, even though AMP was still sliding up, but overall sentiment was still going down. And this was on Bitcoin. Same thing with Ethereum. AMP was flying over, which was where we're getting kind of over-indexing on ETH, which is the better asset right now, meaning most people make more money. But now both are trending down. Hence, this is kind of going in alignment with what your chart is right now, which is a downtrend on ETH.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff for sure. All right, so and for you guys, make sure and get your questions in over on the side. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible. When you look at Bitcoin, because this is one thing that I'm, always wondering in the sense of the value ratio, because you talk about gold and you talk about some other assets now. And we were kind of joking about it before the show. Yeah. But the point is that with Bitcoin where it is right now, as a risk, I would still call it a risk-off asset. A lot of people are sitting on the sidelines, waiting. What is your buy point for Bitcoin? Where are you coming in on an entry?
So in terms of price, it's kind of hard to say, but obviously, like I will say, I'm not buying anything under 10K, but I will buy very heavily at 10K. But in terms of when I'm going to buy, it's when I'm going to go pretty heavy when this 16 green dot confirms. Now, I think it's not going to confirm this time. It could be months before it confirms. It could even be, worst case scenario, December or even January before it confirms, because this is such a big time frame. But wherever price is when it confirms is when I'm going in, because this, for both Bitcoin and ETH, has always been the bottom. Same deal for ETH. When this confirms, and for ETH, I'll look at more of, you could look at our ETH Bitcoin evaluation too to kind of see when it would bottom. This is very interesting to look at for, a lot of those people who just want to go all in on ETH and ignore Bitcoin. I mean, look at this money flow coming out for the ETH Bitcoin evaluation. Right. I think right here, this is a fluke. It could be like this here where Ethereum bleeds against Bitcoin. This was, February 18, where Ethereum bleeds against Bitcoin for, I don't think the next, year and a half, but it could be the next 6 months or next year even, depending on this. And if you kind of map this out for a bottom here, August 2023, it could bleed against Bitcoin. Like you were saying, those fundamentals could fall through. The news, it could be delayed.
Yeah, that's the concern I have right now with Ethereum, is that we have been faked out a few times, many times with Ethereum on missing dates. And because it is such a decentralized asset, there's a lot of devs that are working on it, obviously working parts. Getting to this merge is going to be a pretty significant thing. However, I'm also very positive that if it does happen, this could cause Ethereum to do some very special things in the way of ecosystems, which this is another thing. We'll probably do a video on this, guys. Let us know if you want us to do one around the altcoin ecosystem of Ethereum. So once, let's say we get a confirmed merge, there's going to be a handful of projects that will benefit from that almost overnight, in the essence of what could be longer run times. So it'll be interesting to catch into a few of those. All right, so we're gonna get to some questions right now. I know we have a poll coming in. Let's take a look quickly at the poll. And what do we have here? Bitcoin is gonna fall between 17. Yes, everybody's saying yes, we will see 17 again. 64%. So everybody's kind of coming along the same framework right now that we're on a bullish divergence here, or excuse me, a bearish divergence. So with that being the case, 17K, would you dollar cost average it, say, starting at around 21?
Well, I already bought a lot at 20K, 18K, but yes, I would say definitely anything under 20 to start dollar cost averaging. Even now wouldn't be a bad time to dollar cost average just Bitcoin. I would stay away from ETH for now, but for Bitcoin, if you don't have very much of it, I would say it's a good idea. But if you already bought a lot at 17K, 18K, 20K, I would hold off for now.
So new entry into the market, someone who just first got into crypto, they're seeing these prices, they think, I keep telling people, if you're entering in the crypto market right now, you're seeing prices that a lot of people never saw, that came in 2020 and 2021. Right. So you're seeing stuff in some pretty low areas for sure. Let's get to a few questions. VR emulator, can you look at AVAX potential in September? I can tell you AVAX has been one that has really performed for me. overall. And if I look at just where AVAX is right now, let's take a look. All right, so Avalanche, as you can see right up here, this is when it went from around 14K all the way up to 24. I did a big trade right here. This was a great trade. Matter one of my best trades of the month. But it has been on a downward trend, which is a good thing. But this dip right here on overall amplification, which is kind of the leading indicator that we look at from a sentiment standpoint, has really fallen out for Avalanche. So right now I'm looking for opportunities to catch it as it's falling. Tough to catch falling knives. But if you look at that, what does the chart look like for Avalanche?
So Avalanche is pretty interesting here. So what's different about this is this has held up very well since we still haven't even gone below of our summer 2021 lows. The thing that I don't like on this, the bearish case, we still haven't even gone in the red in the weekly like a lot of other things are. So it's going to be, I think, a bottom. You're going to have to wait till probably at least September for this. And, a lot of these altcoins, worst case scenario, probably could go down another 70-80%. We have a fib level at 65. There is some, if this would be a very good place. If we're able to hold $10, that would be a very good place. The thing for the technical short term, not looking good, very split RSIs on the daily. You did curve into the, green here on the daily, but in these very bearish markets, once you get into the green, look what happened the last time we got in the green. You just crashed down, probably 70%. Let's see what this was, probably something crazy. 86%. I mean, yeah, these altcoins are tough. These altcoins are tough right now.
Well, you got to trade them quick and fast too. You've got to catch a fundamental move or something. There's definitely a big difference there. Watson, Jasu, hey Paul, can you recommend sell of ETH and wait for the bottom to jump back in? Okay, so that is a strategy that I took and have been taking. Depending on where you came into ETH and even Bitcoin to a certain extent, there is some opportunities here to sell, take some profits, and then look for a new entry point. I've done that with a handful of Bitcoin bags where I've been selling at when it hit 24. Just this last weekend, we did a little trade on that. Those are the kind of, but everybody's not necessarily in those kind of positions. But I always say, never be afraid and ashamed to take profits. Take profits.
It's up 100% right now. I would say if you're up over 80% with that, what you can do too, convert some of it over to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will probably outperform it, especially if we dump down, then convert back to ETH.
Yeah, for sure. Mike Cozy, not to mention that if ETH 2.0 migration fails, we're in for a crazy time. Yes, that's exactly our point. Yeah. If we don't see the merge occur in September, even if it's just delayed by 30 days, which again, if it's delayed by 30 days, I will start to not believe that they're going to do a 2022 merge for sure. So I'd be on the lookout for that. Mike Larry, no Fed money to pump up unless they disguise it under stimulus checks. Again, we're seeing a few of that. There's a little bit of indicators there. The thing that I would watch out for, guys, is as we watch these CPIs, because the next two prints are going to be very critical. If we get two major or even slightly negative CPI prints, the price index in comparison to inflation, above the 9.1 that we did in July, then the Fed is going to have no alternative but to do another deep cut on interest. And that's the concern I have that pushes us in to next year, early next year, before we start to see any kind of light at the end of the tunnel. I was hoping that we would see enough of a deep enough cut from the Fed to try to position right before the midterms, and then see a little less, which everybody would assume it's because it's optics here. It's basically how people look at it. For sure. Franklin is coming in. Why XRP is in the 6th or 7th place still? Should one invest in due to be resilience of this security long term? Okay, so XRP, I know you're not a huge fan on XRP.
I'm not the biggest fan, but I would say XRP, like any other altcoin, Bitcoin will probably outperform. Let's just look at XRP Bitcoin, because if it can't outperform Bitcoin, then what's the point here? So let's look at the weekly here. This just keeps bleeding against Bitcoin, and I have to even go on the monthly to look at this. This has bled against Bitcoin since January 2018. So there's a little bit of hope there. You got a monthly bullish divergence, but historically, once we bottom out with everything, about 6 months after is when you want to get into altcoins. I don't know, with the lawsuit and those other things, there's a lot of, if they do well with that, it could really pump up. If they don't do well with that, could still become a dead project. I mean, it's risky.
Yeah, it's well, and I think the key here with XRP, a lot of people look at it from the sense of the fact that it could be very stifled right now in the sense just because it's not available on exchanges.
Right.
If anyone relisted XRP, that would change the fundamentals almost overnight. Any major,
That
I
would
should
be
say,
huge, yeah.
that would change the fundamentals overnight. Just because you'd have a lot of people either one getting in and making their first sale and exit on XRP because they've got a place to do it. Even though, I mean, there are ways to get rid of it. But and there's liquidity out there for it. But the bigger thing I think would be the access for a lot of people that could not buy it.
What I will say is I'm surprised it's done as well as it has, despite all
Under
this.
the conditions.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's done this well.
Yeah, under the conditions. Harley comes in with, I would like to also add that Bitcoin's dominance is showing up in a trend in shrinking month after month. Better hold would be XRP ADA. So his argument here, and I think there's a little bit to that, is that ETH and Bitcoin's dominance level, which a lot of people are kind of talking about a potential flipping too. But dominance for Bitcoin has been slowing a little bit here over the past, even though it's been running as mainly the alpha project out there. Why do you think, and do you think that will have any effect on really going into ETH or other areas?
The thing with that is, one, we have stable coins now that are, that's not, that we have way more stable coins now than we did in 2018.
Sure.
Number two is the fact that it's not going up real high is kind of indicative that we haven't hit a bottom yet.
Right.
If you look at the technicals on Bitcoin dominance right here, look at this weekly, some good curvature, money flow coming up, VWAP coming up. I don't think it's going to come up. When we bottomed last time in December, where was it? November 2018, it was at 60%. Okay. With the stable coins and everything, I don't think it's going to go that high. But I do think you're going to probably come back to June 13th, that June bottom numbers, at least at about 47%. My guess would be at least probably 50% before we really see a top for Bitcoin dominance here. And, this is, if we kind of map out where this could go, April 2023, we could see that top, and that would be 6 months after we bottomed out if we bottom out in September. That's kind of my prediction based off of it. Really, from my experience with this is you got to wait to get into altcoins where nobody cares about them anymore. Everybody still cares about these altcoins. I mean, Litecoin on that list, okay, we got the halvening, but Litecoin just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds, man.
Yeah, well, there's a lot happening here too. I think what we get from you guys is, let's take a look at some of these projects a little bit deeper, because there's a lot of projects, even though I just saw a news release right in the crypto print before we came on that Binance had delisted AMP. So you have a lot of projects that are falling into that. Also remember, the SEC included in that lawsuit investigation to Coinbase, AMP was one of the lead assets, probably I would say one of the biggest assets. So many of these altcoins could fall into that categorization of the SEC, even though if you think and listen to what Michael Burry's talking about, he's just saying, hey, that the SEC really doesn't have a chance at really trying to prosecute any of these guys or get it even done.
It's true, but it's
with
still going to
Bitcoin.
make the price go down.
Exactly. It's the optics is back into, because there's not fundamentals there in the essence of traditional fundamentals that we look at. All right, super healthy. Paul, do you think we will have another major setback like Celsius and Voyager? Yes, I do. I don't know if it's going to happen this year. There's just too much leverage still that is in the market, and there is still too many shenanigans that are happening within many of the companies that are including exchanges, because I don't rule out an exchange falling prey to this. So again, liquidity-wise, watch the on-chain data because there's a lot happening from the sense of people going to more self-custody, and a lot more of that I think will start to continue to put more pressure.
100%. I mean, if Bitcoin goes below 17K, below the previous low is 100%. I mean,
well, the liquidity would shut down so many right there, just in the sense of just the calls. For sure. Real talk. Who would flip ETH if the merger fails? I don't know if anybody would flip ETH, but that would be an interesting possibility. Who would be the alternative because you think about who wins, because Polygon is right now winning because of the ETH merger. And if the merger takes place, Polygon is going to be just a tag-along winner. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's in a great way. As a layer 2, it's really something. But if it doesn't take place, I would look for Cardano and Solana.
I was about to say Cardano. I thought you'd laugh at me, so I was biting my tongue there.
No,
Yeah.
I don't laugh at
Yeah.
Cardano. I'd
Yeah.
never laugh at Cardano. Everybody's always on me about Cardano. It's just I just have not been.
I think it could be Cardano. I don't think the merger will fail, but I think it can be Cardano.
That would be a big
Yeah.
one, man. Charles would be so
Yeah.
happy about that. He'd be just jumping for joy. J-Rom, what will it take to push to 100K this year? Government purposely dragging their feet in terms of legislation, I'm assuming. I don't think we see anything even near 100K this year for even,
Dollar crisis.
Yeah, there would have to be some sort of major event, like literally a zombie apocalypse level, where people are looking to exit the dollar and move into other risk assets, which is obviously Bitcoin and gold would be a big one right
Gold
there.
would be big. Gold,
Yeah.
Bitcoin. You'd need probably civil wars, dollar collapse, World War III, those three things.
Yeah, just a few things. Well,
Yeah.
or we could get some action in Taiwan very easily with China.
That could do it.
Yeah, because that would be enough pressure. Last question to you. Gold.
Gold. Yeah, gold is looking good. Yeah, people have been.
Explain this chart, because
So
I was surprised at looking at this.
What I want to show you guys too, I was talking about this. If you look at gold SPX, and this is gold compared to the S&P 500, we're seeing. Let me go on the monthly here. I circled it out. We're seeing one of those rare times. So if you look at the monthly, let me zoom out a little bit to just show you these rare times where obviously over time it just keeps bleeding against the SPY. But this was 2002. It outperformed the SPY by about 400%, 440% from 2002 to January 2012. So about 10 years there. Look at this money flow right here. Same level of the money flow. And then if we go way back, let's go back to the 1970s here.
Wow.
This is obviously, I'm not even going to try, it's something outrageous, like 10x or whatever from here to about another 10-year period too, a little bit over. About 2,000%, just insane. You would have 20x your SPY shares right there. And the other thing too, let me show you, because people would say, okay, that's cool, but you're never going to outperform, crypto or whatever. Let's look at silver compared to the NASDAQ in, where was it? 2001 to, let me get rid of this fib level right here. Should be, yeah, it outperformed the NASDAQ. I was shocked. I didn't even realize it's outperformed the NASDAQ from, let's see, 2001 all the way to 2011 by 600%.
Yeah.
Just insane. Nobody would have thought.
So
And you're at
interesting.
the same level right here with the money flow. Same level right here with the money flow.
Yeah, and it is one thing, when you guys look at your own portfolios, remember, not investment advice. We do these market movers all the time. So the goal is hopefully help you guys kind of get out there and get your own research going. Maybe it's something that you like in terms of other asset classes out there, because I do think a lot of people are looking for other areas right now, because they're
Right.
selling at the top right now on things like real estate, which
Yeah.
the market is super hot. So many people are taking those profits, moving into other off-risk assets, and I think that's
When you look historically, inflationary times, the two inflationary times we have, 1970s and World War II, gold did very, very well.
Yeah.
Both gold and silver. So
yeah. The only thing I would argue on that is the 80s, and then obviously 2008, which
Right.
was the antithesis of that, in comparison. But we didn't have the asset class of crypto in place either,
right,
which sucks a lot of wind out of the market.
Yeah.
All right, you guys are tuned in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us some kudos over there. But the best thing to do if you want to catch all these charts, a lot of our breakdowns are occurring here on the YouTube channel. And it's really kind of the best place to catch the full experience of what we do here on the network, both on TechPath Crypto, this show, and then also Metaverse Insider. So make sure and tune in over here. Like a few videos, subscribe, hit that bell, and it'll send you notifications for other live streams like this one. Of course, if you guys want to reach me out on Twitter, it's @PaulBaron. If you guys want to catch Evan Aldo, catch the link below. We'll pop something in there. He's got a great market cipher course. If you're into trading, that might be something to take a look at as well. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.